See. Hey guys, hey everybody. My name is Michael Gardner. I am the co-chair for the Professional Development Committee with New York State School Counselors Association. And we are here talking about something extremely important with a very amazing person that not only talks the talk, but walks the walk. Um, we are here with, and I'm gonna say it, Dr. Hennessy Lustica. She is gonna be talking about grant writing for school counselors and just in general. We made it so that we can give it to school counselors, but she is gonna make this an amazing process, and I look forward to all that she's gonna go over. I'm gonna read her bio really quickly. Um, she works in partnership with the Seneca Falls Central School District. She's the CEO and founder of the New York State Mental Health Alliance. Yes, see, well, see, that walks the walk. Sorry. And human development at the University of Rochester. She is also a former school counselor of 22 years, and she has secured more than 35 million in grant funding. So without further ado, I'm not going to talk no more. I'm going to just let her handle her business. Thank you. Without further ado, there you
Great.
go, Hennessy.
Thank you. I'm looking out at a screen of names. There's like nobody, I can't see anybody's faces. But we are going to do a little activity in a while just to get you
Did
situated with
I,
the grant.
I
Can you
put, unspotlight you?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen. There you go. Okay, so I'll share my screen. And I'm using Canva. I usually use Google, but I'm using Canva. So we're going to talk about Grant Writing 101 and a practical starting guide for counselors. I'll talk a little bit about who I am. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, but I'll talk a little bit about how I got into grant writing. It's a whole different world in education that I have loved and found out that I was good at. And really found a way to impact the field in a different kind of way. But it's definitely something that everybody in this room can do with the skills you have as counselors. You're perfectly positioned to be grant writers. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So first and foremost, why counselors belong in grant writing. So I know that it can feel like when you say grant writing, it can feel super overwhelming. It can feel like, how would I ever be able to do this? But counselors really see the big picture, right? You're the first ones to see the unmet needs across the students you're working with, across families, and across the system as a whole. And I think that we take that for granted sometimes because that's the way that we're trained and that's the way that our brains work when we're working. But not everybody else's brain kind of works that way. So having that big systemic picture that counselors come to the table with is optimal for grant writing. Counselors also understand how mental health, academics, behavior, attendance, and well-being intersect. So that's the world, especially school counselors, that we live in, right? The academics, the social emotional, the college career, and then all of those other factors that are impacting that. And we can really take a step back and look at our school system or look at our county or look at our BOCES and say, wow, there's probably a better way to do this. And let me kind of think that through because you can see all of it. Counselors also routinely work across multiple systems. I think this is a skill that we don't give ourselves enough credit for. You're able to like talk the talk with families, with students, with teachers, with administrators, with community partners, with institutes of higher education. Like everybody speaks a different language. And as counselors, you come in and you're able to cross talk across those systems. That is a huge, huge benefit to being a grant writer. Again, not a benefit that everybody else has. The other thing is that many strong grants begin as counselor identified problems, not top-down initiatives. So your superintendents are not writing grants. I can tell you that. Each district has a grant writer, or there's specific people in the field like I am that'll come in and do that for you. But when we see a grant come out and we're like, oh, a district would benefit from this, we're going to talk to the counselors. We're going to talk to the social workers, to the school psychs, right? We're not going first to the administrators because we want to know what's happening on the ground. The other thing is grant writing is less about finance and more about clearly defining things. So when you say $35 million, that feels like this big, scary number, right? But it's not really about that. And we're going to talk about budgets, but it's about defining like why does this population need this? What is going to be the impact of this? And what are going to be the outcomes of whatever program we put in place? And then your superpower is translating human experiences into data formed in narratives. So if you're following your comprehensive school counseling plan, you're doing that data informed stuff every single day. You're taking what your kids say, what your teachers say, what your, attendance data says and your discipline data says, and you're turning it into a narrative. That's exactly what grants are. It's just a narrative of everything that's going on. So, why I'm teaching this, and I want to be really clear about this, is that I am not a magic grant fairy. I think people think I am, but I'm not at all. I just happen to stumble upon something that I'm good at. And if you stumble upon something that you're good at, then really dig in and do that. There's lots of things that I'm not good at. So, I work at the University of Rochester. I have no journal articles published, but I have lots of money in grants. So, you got to figure out what you're good at. I identify as a school counselor, always have. It was the best job I ever had in my life. I loved it. And now I get to work through NISMA with school counselors on their professional development and their self-efficacy and their burnout and retention and all that great stuff. I'm also a counselor educator and then the district lead for a lot of these grants that we've written. So I do have experience writing, submitting, revising, managing grants. Learn things that didn't even know existed. Lots of things about budgets, lots of things about working with the state, working with the federal government. And we're going to talk about all of those as we go. So it's really important for you to look at both the grants that we have been awarded and the grants that we have not been awarded. And I can add two more to the grants not awarded list that we just found out a couple weeks ago. But it's a mix, right? So we've been lucky to win some pretty big ones. We've had some stuff happen where the money has been kind of taken back, and now there's all these lawsuits and trying to figure out if the money is going to be reinstated. But there's also grants that have not been awarded. So I think the best grant that I ever wrote was the $15 million mental health school-based services grant. I was like, this could go in a textbook. It's so good. Yeah, we didn't get funded. So you might think that you're doing something super great, but you might not get funded. But every grant that you write can be the blueprint for the next one that you do get funded for. So what a grant actually is. So a grant is a contract. It's a contract between whoever the funding entity is and the person that wins the grant. And this one's really important. It's based on someone else's priorities and rules. So the grants that I write for are predominantly training grants in the workforce development area, and they're based on whatever the priorities are of either the federal government's administration or the state administration, or we have some private funding, so the private founders' priorities. And what we can do is say, oh, do what is what we're doing aligning with those priorities? And if yes, let's get a shot at this. But it's not me coming in and saying, this is what I think you should do. It's me saying, oh, look, this grant looks like something we could align with. And the grant is also funded work you're agreeing to carry out, document, and report on. So it's very different between a federal grant, a state level grant, and private funding for the reports that you have to do and the documentation that you have to do. And we're going to look at that a little bit. But you're saying by winning this grant, filling out this contract and saying, yep, I'm going to do this work, you're agreeing to do it. You're agreeing to document it and you're agreeing to report on it as many times a year as they want you to report on it. A grant is not free money, not even close. We are very careful to engage in very ethical fiduciary practices. We work with our business officials down to the penny. So we make sure that the money is being used directly as the program says that the money is being used. It's also not a wish list. So you can't be like, oh, I want this, 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 and this. I want this in my grant. You have to be very specific, and you have to justify everything that you put in there. It's also not a side project. So I have experience writing grants, but I also have a lot of experience managing grants, and those are two very different worlds. So it's for me, it's super fun to write a grant. It's a little less fun to manage the grant because there's so many moving parts to that. And if you're going to run like a super big program, you can't do it on the side. It makes it very difficult. And then what grant writers are really asking, um, so they put out their proposal and they're saying, is this a real problem? And do you have data to back up that problem in your area? So in your school district, is this a problem? And how do you know it's a problem? And you have to show all that data. Um, is whoever is writing the grant, are they the right group to address it? Is that who is supposed to be addressing that problem? Is the plan realistic and doable? Usually you have benchmarks, right? You might have a 1 year of funding, 2 years of funding, 3, 4, 5 years of funding. The goal at the end of funding is sustainability. So grant funders want to know, all right, you're going to put this thing in place. We're going to give you all this money to do this, but are you going to be able to sustain it over time? Will it actually make a difference? Every grant that we write has outcomes that are tied to kids and families directly. So we work with districts and get a lot of data from the districts and say, okay, are all of these things that we're putting in place through this money, is it actually making a difference? And then can the group be trusted to manage the work and the money? So it's a very rigorous process to be the lead on a grant. You have to fill out tons of paperwork. You have to give your bank information and, if you've ever been cited for auditing that didn't go well from a grant in the past, like all of that stuff has to be documented in order to be eligible to be the lead on a grant. So here's some common grant terms that you might hear. And again, I write training grants, not research grants. So these are all in the training field. But RFP, NOFO, FOA, this is like RFP is it's the packet that you get that says response for proposal. So the call goes out for a proposal from whatever entity. They say, we have this much money to give out. We're going to give away this many awards. And here are all the instructions and all of the rules that you need to follow in order to be in the running for this. And I'm going to share one of those packets with you in a second. They're very long. They tend to be very convoluted. And I think that that's on purpose, right? They want to weed out folks that aren't really interested in doing this. And the rules and instructions are all over the place. So it's not like section 2, all the rules. There might be a rule in section 1, a rule in section 4, a rule in section 10. So you have to really read your RFPs. The LEA or the SEA stands for the Lead Educational Agency or the State Educational Agency, and that's the district or the state that is going to house the grant. So they're the lead. They are the ones responsible for implementing it. They're the ones responsible for all the money that has to do with it. They're the ones responsible for the reporting. They're the lead on the grant. And IHE stands for Institute of Higher Education, so a college or university, and we partner all of our grants with IHEs. The lead applicant, again, the LEA, that's who holds the money. And then all of your partners are the folks that help do the work. So for us, I can give you an example. One of our grants is through the Seneca Falls Central School District, but we have a consortium of 9 districts in that grant, 3 community partners, and 4 IHEs. And those are all the people that are doing the work. The Seneca Falls is holding the contract. They're doing the budget part. They do the money. They give out the money, but all of those partners are the ones that are actually doing the work. And that's how grants are written. So again, it's not about money, right? So before you even go looking for money, you really need to flip your mindset from a counselor mindset to a grant writer mindset. They're very similar. You have all the skills that you need to be able to do that. But I would say that the execution is a little bit different. So you have to think about what problem keeps showing up. So if you guys think about all of your districts right now, I'm sure you can think of a systemic problem that keeps showing up over and over again, right? Who is affected by that problem? Usually it's kids, it's families, it's underserved populations. Who is affected by that? What are you already doing that's working? So that's really important. a grant can't be the entire thing. It has to supplement what you're doing that's already working because you need it to be sustainable. So how can you add something else on that really might make a difference that your district does not have the resources to do alone? And then that's the next question. What can't you do because of limited resources? So again, think about your districts. What problem is showing up? Who's affected? What are you doing that's working? And then what can't you do? And then you take that, what can't you do, and you turn that into the grant writing mindset. So you have to be very careful when you write them, because grants reward clarity, not passion. You might be like the biggest champion for whatever problem that you want to solve. You might be the biggest champion for that. If you can't articulate it on paper in the way that the grant instructions say, you're not going to get funded. Strong grants say no to good ideas, and you're writing for a reviewer. So typically, the reviewers may be in your field or may not be in your field. So for federal grants, when a big federal grant comes out, you'll also see a posting come out for grant reviewers. And one of the things that they say is, preference would be in the mental health field, but we'll take anybody that we can get. So the reviewers are given literally like a sheet of paper because I've reviewed grants before, and there's a checklist on them. And they look at what the description is, they look in your narrative for that to be there, and they put a check. And they do it with the next one, they put a check. They do it with the next one, they put a check. So they're really following the RFP to the letter. So what you might be super passionate about something, but you don't want to be all flowery in your writing about it because that's not what's going to get funded. So on the bottom, one of the hardest parts of grant writing is leaving out good ideas so the main idea stays strong enough to get funded. So you might have other things that you're like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. You can add those things after you win. The first thing you want to do is win. And to be able to win, you have to be clear in what your program is going to be. So step by step, how grants are actually written. So the RFP, read it twice before you start anything. Print it out, read it, write on it, and then get to work on it. Um, I don't typically do them in order, like the RFPs. There'll be different sections in each one of the RFPs. I start with the budget, but other people might start with different things. So figuring out what works for you. But you want to read that RFP twice before you even dig into it because there's always like little hidden gems that you have to put like one sentence here and one sentence there. And if it's not there, then you get points marked off on that. You want to clarify the problem and follow the directions exactly. Exactly, exactly. They'll give you like a layout of what they want it to look like. You can use their own words right back at them. You just copy exactly what the section name is, and then you write exactly what they want you to write. You do the next one, you write exactly what you want you to write. You write it for somebody that might not know what you're talking about, right? And you want to make it as clear as possible for them. Then you sketch the solution. You have to use data, and you want a whole bunch of data sources. You want local data, you want your regional data, you want your state data, and you want your national data. And you want to use data strategically to point to why your entity needs this grant, right? So, if we do a lot with like ratios, like counselor to student ratios, so we would talk about, the recommended average is 250 to 1, right? That's the national average. In our region, the average is 330 to 1, but in our school, it's 520 to 1. So you can see how that data helps you to say, this is where we need this program. Then you're going to identify your partners. Your partners are so, so, so important. We have like a cadre of partners that we use on every single project just because we've built, we've 6 years building relationships with these folks now. We really understand their entities. We understand what they're looking for. They understand us. We're able to send them an email and say, can you write a letter of support for us? And they'll get it right back to us. So identifying who your partners are going to be, and even on the grants that aren't funded, it's really important to, thank your partners and say, let's do this again for the next one, and really have, folks in the field that can be there to help you. Building the budget, we're going to talk about the budget in here. The budget for the grants that we write, it's usually the same. They give you a form. You have to fill out like how much for personnel, how much for fringe, how much for supplies, how much for travel, how much for contracts, how much for indirects, and then you add it all up. The RFP will tell you how much you can spend. It'll say, 52 awards are going out, and awards are anywhere from 750 to $1 million. I always go high. I always go to the top ceiling of the grant because they can come back to you and say, yes, we can fund this, but not for that much. But I don't ever want to write something that could have been funded for that much, and it's not because I chickened out and wrote lower, right? So I always go for the top. And then, so once you do all of that, you submit your grant. There's all these different portals that you can submit through. And then you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait for a very long time. There's grants that we've been waiting for 6 months to hear about. Usually they try to put out a date as to when you'll hear something back, and then that date passes, and then you check your email 45 times every minute, and you're like, did I get this? Did I get this? So it's definitely an exercise in patience to wait it out. So here's what I want to do. I want you guys to look at, this is, I think, the best way to learn, to look at what an RFP looks like. So I'm going to put an RFP in the chat, and it's from the Mental Health Service Professionals Grant in 2022. This is the one that we won for Seneca Falls. But I want you to just take a couple minutes and I want you to look at it. And I want you to see if you can identify these things. So I'm going to give you 8 minutes and I want you to try to identify who can apply for the grant. What are the absolute priorities? What do you have to know? What are the page limits? What are the required data? What are the budget rules? And what do you need in the attachments? And then after that 8 minutes is up, I'm going to ask you to come off mute and tell me how this process was for you. Okay? So let me hit escape. Let me share this. Okay, it says anyone with link can see it. I'll put it in the chat. So let me know if you can pull that up. You're able to see it? Okay. Go back to this page. All right. Everybody's got it? You guys can see it? All right, I'm going to start my time right now. I'm going to give you 8 minutes and see what you can find. Go. 30 more seconds. All right, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Somebody come off mute. What did you guys think?
I feel like I need a legal degree to read this.
That was a lot of information to shift through with a little bit of time.
Hmm.
Same. I was like, what am I reading? This is foreign. And I was like,
Hmm.
the wording was just throwing me off. I was like trying to skim through to see if I could grab something that sounds normal. And I was just like, no.
What are these words?
Still.
Poor Michael. Could you talk through your phone, maybe?
Of course, the good news is you probably don't have to answer questions within 8 minutes typically when you.
No, no, you get about 3 weeks. They usually give you about 3 weeks, which is not very much time to get everything together with your partners and all that kind of stuff.
And given how thick they are, it might take 3 weeks to read it all.
Yep. 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 Okay.
I
So I
wonder
just wanted
whether
to, oh,
AI would be, I'm sorry, it's Marilyn. I'm the one that no picture late in the day. I'm just saying, hopefully AI grant writing, maybe you could help, or maybe the prompts. Like, in other words, if you put in and create the narrative and then pump it in. My first job, I paid $19,000 in 1985. It was funded by Attendance Improvement Dropout Prevention Grant in New York State. I work on Long Island. So my first job, and I had to do the grant to keep the job.
yeah.
So that's how it was. They must have applied for the grant, got it because there was poor attendance K through 8, and then I had to initiate the grant to keep the job. I.e., I'm still here.
There
But
you go.
I was my job was only funded for the first like 3 years. Do you know what I mean? Through the grant whenever it ran out, and then they actually got a K-8 counselor, and now we have one at the middle school and the high school, which is good. But I'm saying it's a lot of work. That no way did I have to do this as a newbie. I mean, it was
Mhm.
a very basic grant. I think I filled in the boxes back in the day, and it wasn't like this. So this seems extremely comprehensive, and I think that you need somebody from district office, like, to partner with you with the numbers.
Oh yeah, you
Maybe,
need a lot of partners for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
You need a partner for data. And Marilyn, it sounds like your district had a sustainability plan, right? So the grant did what it was supposed to do. It paid for you, and then you got to stay. So that's
Right.
what it's supposed to do. And I didn't show you this to overwhelm you. I just showed you this. Look, there's my timer. I just showed you this to let you know that the formula on them, the first time I read one of these, I was like, what the heck is this? This isn't even English. It makes no sense to me whatsoever, right? But the formula, once you read more and more of them, is kind of the same. So once you get familiar with the format that they write the RFPs in, then you're like, oh, oh, oh. And Marilyn, to your point, AI has been a lifesaver, right? So I can do things like put in, I'll write my part and then I'll put in the little narrative from the RFP and I'll say, what did I miss? And then AI can help me to see what I missed and what I need to add to that. Or I'll say, like, what do I need to put in here for full points from a reviewer that's not, up on this subject? And it'll tell me what I need to do. So I don't have AI write the grant for me, but I have them like as a thought partner back and forth. All right, let me share again. And I promise you guys can do this. Okay, so the first part is always a need statement. So grants always ask for a need statement. It doesn't matter what grant I've written, it always wants to know why why do you need this program? Why do you need this money? Why, what about you? And this is what I talked about before with the local data, the regional comparison, the state comparison, the national comparison. You always want to set it up that way, and you want to use data that's going to be in your favor, right? So this is totally counselor territory. Like you guys know, how many kids are absent in a given year. How many referrals that you're getting. You know how many kids are on your caseload. How many need tier 2 interventions. How many need tier 3 interventions. You already have all of this data just in your job as a school counselor. So it's the perfect match to be able to write a needs statement. You want to be specific in your needs statement. You want to cite a number of sources, right? So we always cite things like local screeners that are given, universal screeners that are given. We might cite the census. We'll cite things like employment rate and educational attainment rate, like those kinds of things. And you want to write those out as succinctly as you possibly can. So this is another place where I would use AI now to help me. I'd be like, is this succinct enough? Is there another statistic that I need to put in here that is going to make this stronger for me, right? So adding all of those things. And then you want to say, why now? So these problems have been happening forever and ever, right? It took a while to get to this data. Why does it need to change now? And that's where you can use your counselor brain to think about why you think it needs to change now, and then what program you want to do to be able to change it. So I know data can be scary. I do a lot of professional development, and sometimes, I think there's like two camps, like folks that are like, yeah, I got this with data, and then other folks that are like, this is hard, and both are true, right? Both can be true. But you really want to look in your district. If you're going to write a grant for your district, you want to look at what data already exists. You don't need to reinvent the wheel by coming up with like fancy schmancy data protocols. There's a lot of data that already exists. And what can you pull? What data are you allowed to pull? And then through your project, what are you going to collect? So you want to collect data that already exists because that's going to make your reporting way easier. I didn't learn this until like 3 years in. So for the first grants that I was writing like these crazy data points that I was like, oh, this would be fun to do. This would be fun to do. And then we got to reporting time and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to collect this, right? So if you can find data that already exists, then that's what you want to capitalize on. So there's a little example down here. So if you want to talk about student perception of school climate and you have a universal screener that your district uses every year, put that in there because that's the data that you're just reporting out, right? Or if you want to, we do a lot with self-efficacy with our school-based mental health folks, and we do a lot of surveys with them. We already do that in like the normal course of business. I can just pull that over to this grant. The other thing is if you're writing multiple grants, you want to put the same data in each grant. So you only have to collect it one time, right? And you can report it out in each. You have to figure out how you're going to collect it, who's responsible, and how often you're going to do it. And the RFPs really leave that up to you. Like they have certain benchmarks that they need you to be to report, but the other stuff they leave it up to you. So keep it short, right? Keep it the data that'll tell the story, but is not taking you 5 years to be able to collect. So your must-haves, we talked about this before, are your partners. Your partners are your most important people. I've found that it's really important to have partners that are going to do the work with you and partners that are going to support you in doing the work. Those partners that are going to support you in doing the work are going to be like your state associations. So like NYSCA is a great one. State Ed is a good one. The Office of Mental Health is a good one. So making friends with all of those people and building those relationships is really important. You want a lot of grants call for letters of support from elected officials. So we make sure that we have really good relationships with our Congress people and with our Assembly people and with we have a really good relationship with Schumer and Gillibrand, just making sure that we have people we can reach out to and say, this is the work that we're doing. It's really important. Can you write a letter of support for this? And more times than not, they are so happy to do that. Your program design, that's the most fun part. That's where you get to use your brain and say, what can this program look like? This problem that I'm going to solve, how am I going to do it? You can be as innovative as you want to be. And we're pretty innovative in our approaches, but this to me is fun because the sky's the limit, right? This is saying, if there were no barriers, what would I do? And then you can write that program about what you're going to do. You're going to talk about who's served, what happens, how often, by whom, and where it lives in the system. Every single grant is going to ask you for that. So you have this beautiful program, but how is it going to stay there if you leave, right? So you have to build it from a systems level framework. And then every grant comes with attachments and portals. So the portals, here's a few that we've used: Grants Gateway, G5, Just Grants. They are just like any other form of technology. Sometimes they can be clunky. They like to have maintenance for like a week before grants are due. They like to not work sometimes. So you really want to look at the date that the grant is due and make sure that you give yourself enough leeway time on the back end to get it in on time, because they're not going to accept a late grant. That's just not going to happen. You need resumes of all of your partners, and you need letters of support, and you need MOUs. So there's a lot of legwork that has to happen. And like I said, sometimes you get 3 weeks to write a grant, sometimes you might get 4 weeks to write a grant. So if you have all of these partners that you're already working with, you can very easily get the letters of support and MOUs because they're already your partners, right? That's the long game is building those relationships, and getting all of those partners. So the budget, I like to do the budget because it's really about, what are we going to do? What does it cost? Is it realistic? But it's kind of like you're just putting numbers down, right? So um, everybody might do it different. This is how I do it, but I'm gonna give you the stipulation. This is not the right way. This is the way that I do it. I round everything to the whole dollar. The RFPs always say, every RFP I've read says don't put cents in there. So you're never gonna put like $25,000 and 50 cents in your budget. Um, I also I tend to do like the big chunks like you see there: $25,000, $96,000, $44,000, and try to make the math work, because once you are awarded the grant, you can always work with your project officer to do a budget modification. Right? So you don't want to spend a million years on the budget, because you can always change it, and you want to spend more time getting the other parts of your grant done. So every grant asks for a breakdown of different areas. So personnel is always on there, contractual is always on there, and then they always ask for a justification. So you need to tell them why you pick the amount of money that you're going to spend. And there's lots of ways to do that. There's some national calculators that you can use to do that. You can do that based on the salary structure in your district. You can do it based on how much that would cost in the field. If you have a vendor, you do it based on how much their product is. But you want to justify why you did it for that much money. And then every grant asks for indirect costs. So indirect costs are part of the budget. So if your budget is $1 million, you have to include those indirect costs in there. Every LEA has an approved indirect cost rate with the state and with the federal government. So your business officials will have that information, and they have like a restricted and an unrestricted. So we tend to pick a number in the middle, and we have to attach our cost rate with that. And those indirect costs go to the lead to help with all the back of the house stuff that needs to be done. So the lead can decide where that money goes, but typically it goes to like your secretaries, any sort of administrator oversight that you need, and administrative oversight that you need. If you have to do payroll, if you have to run for insurance and all of your fringe benefits and that kind of stuff, that helps to offset those kinds of extra things that the folks in your district have to do. So folks like to be the lead because they get indirect costs on that. But it's also very complicated to be the lead because you're the one, you're the one on the hook and it's doing all of the work. And then if I can convince you to learn to do anything if you want to be a grant writer is to learn how to write a logic model. I took one course in grant writing and it focused, this was like way back, like 2013 or something when I was getting my LMHC at Alfred, and they offered a course on grant writing. I'm like, this is cool, let me take it. And the one thing I got out of it was how to write a logic model. So, everybody hates them, but they really, really matter, and most grants call for them. Again, this is just like a proposal, a template of like, this is what we're going to do, and these are our outcomes, and these are the impact that it's going to have. This doesn't mean that it absolutely is going to happen, but this is the blueprint that you're going to follow through the life of your grant. So really, all you're doing is explaining what your program is on a spreadsheet. So you're talking about your resources, who are the people that are going to do these things? You're talking about your activities, what are you going to do? Your outputs, right? What is going to come from that? Your outcomes, and then your impact. Your outcomes, sometimes grants call for like short-term, middle-term, long-term outcomes. Each grant is going to have a different template to do that, but learning how to write a logic model is really going to help you. And then you submit it, right? And then you wait. And when I say you wait forever, you wait forever. And sometimes you don't get the grants. And that's okay because every single submission helps you write the next one you're going to do. And it helps like spark in your mind, like, oh, I have a really cool idea for a program. And maybe there's ways to start doing that program without all of that money, right? Maybe there's little things that you can do. And then the next time you write for that grant, you can say, look what I was able to do with no resources. Can't imagine what I could do with these resources, right? When your grants are scored, you get all of that information back from the reviewers. So, one of the most valuable things for us has been looking at what the reviewers said about our grants. Usually 3 to 4 people review independently, and then teams come together and review in a team format. And it blows my mind because there's such a huge difference between reviewers, right? You might score, if the high score is 100, you might get 20 from one reviewer and 90 from another reviewer. And it's interesting to see where the differences are and what you could have done clearer the next time. So even if your grants get rejected, just keep putting them in, right? The only thing you're giving up is time. So just keep putting them in and really, really work off that feedback. One of the important things that we learned is about diversifying your funding streams. So we write for a whole slew of funding streams. So federal, state, local, private foundations. And what we do is called braided funding. It's completely legal. The Department of Education puts out, and DOJ too, I think, puts out like webinars on how to do braided funding. The point is that you want to, all of our programs are very similar in their scope, but we write them in a way that if a grant is discontinued, people don't lose their jobs and kids are not affected. So we had a crash course in that this last year because our federal grants that were sustaining us, we had 2 of them, one in 2022, one in 2025, those got taken back by the current administration. And so hopefully that money is gonna be reawarded. We're trying to figure that out, but because we were able to braid our funding, because not everything was being paid for out of one bucket of money, we were able to sustain programming, even though that money had stopped. So we learned really quick how to work with our state stakeholders, how to work with local funding, and then private foundations have been kind of a really interesting, lovely way to do things. So we have grants from the Tau Foundation and from Mother Cabrini Foundation, and they're wonderful. The reporting requirements are very different than federal and state, and they usually have unrestricted funds, which means you can use that money to help support somewhere where another grant might have been taken away or been sunsetted. So you don't just want to write one grant for one program, because if that goes away, then that person loses their job and kids don't get what they need. So diversifying funding is really, really important. And then sustainability. And the political landscape. So there's kind of 2 things here. Every grant that you write, the point is to be sustainable. So you want to figure out how you're going to build this program, and then whoever is benefiting from this program is going to take it over financially. And every grant wants you to write a sustainability plan. So, how are you going to keep all of this going once the money sunsets, right? Once it's gone. And you can't depend on, oh, I'm going to get another grant to keep this going. They'll give you 0 points for that. So they really want to know a sustainability plan. We work really closely with BOCES. So our sustainability plans are through shared services a lot of the times, and COSERs, and then districts have to pay in for our services, but it's a good sustainability plan. Um, Most grants are time limited by design. So some might be a year, 2 years, 3 years. The biggest one we've gotten is 5 years long. And then some of them might let you do another 5 years after that, but nothing is guaranteed. So you really need a sustainability plan. And funders really want to know what happens after the grant ends, because the funders want to make a difference too, especially with your private foundation money. Like, they're really passionate about the stuff that they're putting their money towards. And it's like, how are you going to make sure that this makes a difference? Um, so sustainability does not mean the grant pays for everything forever. You have to figure out how things are going to be paid for once the grant money is gone. Grants reflect values, priorities, and timing. So they reflect, this is kind of in that political landscape. So they reflect the priorities of the state, the priorities of your region, the priorities of the federal government, the priorities of the private funders. Again, you're writing to somebody else's priorities, and sometimes those priorities change over time. So making sure that your program can be seen through the lens of different priorities is really important. And then language really matters, because the same program can be framed in different ways to meet whatever the mandates and priorities are. So if you have a really great program and it's giving really good outcomes, and you know that this is something that needs to continue, you can change your narrative to make sure that it aligns with the new priorities that are coming out. Funding often follows workforce shortages, public health trends, legislative focus areas, and budget cycles and elections. So we pay attention to things that I never paid attention before, like the state of the state, and the governor's budget, and OMH is like, how much money did Office of Mental Health get? How much money is our federal agencies getting to be able to put out? So we pay attention to all of those things to think about what could be new funding streams for us as we sustain our work and diversify our work. So what this means for counselors. So back to counselors, the best thing I think that you guys can do as counselors is to advocate. So even if you're feeling like, I am never writing a grant after this, you can still be a partner on a grant. You can still advocate on the systemic level to say, this is a program that we need, and let's figure out how to do that, even if you're not the writer, right? You can also say, this is something that I'm really feel passionate about and I want to be involved in. So you're a partner on that grant. But your voice is very strong. NYSCA's voice is very strong. NYSCA's written into every one of our grants as a partner. And we're able to kind of advocate together for the field. You can see that we got some publicity when our mental health grants were kind of taken back. So that picture, I hate that picture on the left. It looks like I'm like sitting in I don't even know. I don't even know. It's a terrible picture. But we were featured in the AP Press, did a story, and it went out to 33,000 news articles about why kids need mental health support, and the fact that you can't pull school-based mental health staff from buildings. And it's going to hurt kids. So we were able to do a lot of advocacy through that. We were able to write articles. We were able to partner with NYSET on a lot of this stuff. And then we had Chuck Schumer came to Seneca Falls, and I'm standing there with Mary Bees there, president of NYSCA, and we have some superintendents standing there with us. And he did a press conference about why you can't just take student mental health money away. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't, but as counselors, it's our job to advocate for those that can't advocate and don't have a voice. So this is something that me and my team have learned to do really well. And rejection is often about fit, not quality. So even if your grant gets rejected, that doesn't mean that it was a bad idea. It just means that it doesn't fit with what that funder's priorities are, and you just find a new funder. That's how you do it. So that's a lot of talking at you. I'll let you guys ask me questions. We do have a website, so it's nismaalliance.org, and you can go on and look at that website and look at all the work that we're doing in districts across the state. But let me stop sharing and let you guys ask me any questions that you want to ask me, or thoughts, or anything that you want to share.